Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Coldplay called Everyday Life. You know, it feels like it's been longer than it actually has been since I've talked about Coldplay. Now, for you all, that's got more to do with Warner Music Group throwing a copyright block on my review of their last album, A Head Full of Dreams, to take it down worldwide only days after it was posted, cause spineless violations of journalistic fair use, they're fun for all the family, right? But the larger truth is that I just haven't had much of an incentive to seek out or discuss Coldplay in the 2010s. Sure, they had a single pop up on my year-end list of the best hits of 2016, that being Him for the Weekend with Beyonce, but to be perfectly candid, that was more a factor of the Hot 100 in the year-end for 2016 being an absolute garbage fire than that song being a credible standout. In a stronger year, it probably wouldn't have made the list. And yet, this isn't coming from someone who, as a critic, dislikes Coldplay, even if they've given me plenty of credible reasons, because for the most part, I like this band. They got a couple good albums, they're incredible live. But if I were to compare the cyclical melodic progressions, the strident crescendos, and the willowy wistfulness of their best material in the 2000s, the 2010s have seen them rather flailing with pop and electronic pivots that don't really play to their strengths. Rarely bad, but frequently underweight and really kind of bland. Now granted, it didn't help that the production quality took a nosedive when they ditched Brian Eno, but I'd argue the bigger problem was a collapse in their dynamic range. At their best, Coldplay can take their broad abstractions to really soar, feel like so much more than was present explicitly in the text. But with every layer of stiff percussion and underweight electronics, I just got no real emotional impact. There was just nothing there for me. And thus, yeah, I was worried about Everyday Life, because at this point, Coldplay's pop pivot was not gonna stop, especially given Max Martin was still co-writing with them. And yet, while this album was being advertised as a double album, in reality each disc was pretty short, so the project still clocked under an hour, thank God. And hey, rock bottom expectations, nowhere to go but up, right? So, how is Everyday Life? So I'm going to be very blunt right now, right out of the gate. Even for my low expectations, I can argue convincingly this is Coldplay's worst album to date. And while I said something similar for A Head Full of Dreams, this time it's for very different and likely more contentious reasons. And yep, I completely understand why there's a whole lot of critics who are calling this Coldplay's best and most important album in years. Well, it's because there is a formula that'll appeal to a certain brand of middlebrow critic and listener that even Coldplay can execute. And yet, that does precisely nothing for me. And yeah, I know it makes me look like the bad guy or the hater to come down on a project that is otherwise so pleasant or inoffensive with such a good message. But when I can say that nothing here even rises to the best of Coldplay this decade, let alone the last decade, that's a serious goddamn problem. Because this is not good. And let's start off with the sound and the production. And you know what? I will give the first big pass to Coldplay here. I'm not expecting a rock album. Even though that was the band's sound at the most propulsive and dynamic and interesting, I'm able to tolerate the band going pop, and hell, most of the badly placed electronics and synthetic vocal filters, they're gone. That's gotta be a positive step, right? Well, that's the thing. You can't really place this album within mainstream pop, or even rock. In fact, I'd argue the most apt sonic comparison is the late 80s to early 90s easy listening scene, with the faint hints of world music and the percussion that are mostly embarrassing, and some of the heavy-handed sample choices that comprise the weird genre hopping that's all over this thing. It's being praised as diverse for cribbing elements of overly pristine Christian music and a slightly better developed rhythm section, as well as all the quasi-choppy acoustic guitars from the most recent lifeless version of Maroon 5, but none of it's got texture, or punch, or gravitas, or soul, or any sort of potent crescendo, you know, what used to be Coldplay's greatest compositional asset. For God's sakes, Vampire Weekend is less white bread than this on their most recent album. Instead, most electric guitars are shoved midway to the back to spark unconvincingly or cycle through an underwhelming passage, and the pianos, they're pushed behind a film that tends to muffle any sort of sparkle or flair. And look, Coldplay has always been kind of saccharine and innocent and very middle-brow, but songs like Daddy are damn near childlike, featuring an AJR-esque regressive Peter Pan complex. It's just distracting. And normally you would argue that Chris Martin's voice would cut through, add a little something here. But across the vast majority of this album, he sounds utterly checked out, occasionally overpowered by some of his backing vocalists, and even when he sounds like he cares, like on Church and parts of the title track, there's so little to really work with here. That's the other alarming thing. For a wait of 4 years between albums, the fact that so many of these songs sound unfinished or fragmented or lacking a proper hook or good mix depth or mastering, it's genuinely alarming. You could at least tell that Milo Xyloto or A Head Full of Dreams, they were trying to have a little bit more ambition there, but Everyday Life barely breaks out of park, let alone get into a higher gear. And you know what? I'm thoroughly sick of passing off and excusing unfinished pieces of songs jumbled together as experimental or genre pushing. The 1975 did something just as milquetoast last year. Kanye West already tried it with his gospel mistake this year, and while the gospel is better on this project, I'm still not buying it. This isn't post-structural or postmodern, it's undercooked. It's lazy. And here's what drives me crazy. In today's day and age where vibe and low-key are treasured among playlists and the unfinished mix will get mainstream airplay, I'm under no illusions that this is gonna do well, and even why some critics will praise it as being different. It's the same damn reason why I'm so consistently unimpressed by so many of the Baroque pop set are trying to emulate the mid-60s and are not sticking the landing. It's branding itself as different and experimental while just dredging up a sound that was limp and lousy years ago, in this case about 30 years ago, now with less structure. And since people don't remember the history of sounds like this, because of most of its charting success was roundly forgotten and for good reason, people are simply praising it as if it's new, at least for Coldplay, as if it doesn't reflect a total regression across the board. And you know what, that's not even saying that there aren't moments where Coldplay's approach comes close to working here either. Both Arabesque and Orphans, they got a little bit of low-end groove I kinda like, and the former probably being the best song here thanks to the thicker acoustic riff and the horn section and something of an abortive crescendo. The song ends really awkwardly, and even I can say that songs like Everyday Life has some elegant shimmer with the strings, and Old Friends, it's a passable acoustic ballad. But on the flip side, especially with the higher backing vocals clumsily blended into a retro pickup, Cry Cry Cry, it sounds like it belongs in an overdone holiday commercial because the advertising agency couldn't get the rights to any Christmas songs. And the Christmas songs were royalty free. And here's the thing, if Coldplay was using this slapdash, scattered approach to surround a more poignant or powerful theme, like they're trying to be postmodern, make it interesting, that'd be one thing. But we now gotta talk about the lyrics, which have consistently been Coldplay's giant weak point when the broad swings for the fences don't work. And I'm bringing back my 3 Ps for good political art: power, precision, populism. Because between the marketing and the overarching themes and choice of samples in this project, Coldplay is clearly trying to make this a message album. You think since Milo Xyloto they would have learned that Chris Martin does not have the writing chops to pull that off, but hey, you know what? If Coldplay wants to make a big, give worldwide peace a chance album, it serves an audience, I guess, but said message begins falling apart at the seams pretty quickly, as songs like Church and Old Friends seem to be framed a lot more intimately on like relationships, and that's where you factor in a song as cloying as Daddy, which is about exactly what you think it is. More alarmingly is the failure of any consistent tone. Trouble in Town actually gets pretty real with a live sample of a violent police encounter, but if you're expecting any sort of deeper criticism or commentary on systemic racism beyond just platitudes, well, you're not getting it here. And it gets rapidly very hard to buy into Chris Martin having any sort of coherent political point when you get a song like Guns, which with its prominent Bob Dylan reference and choppy folk construction, it's clearly trying to make a sardonic point emphasizing gun control, but the hook is emphasizing how everyone's crazy, maybe even him. And on the first verse mentions how said revolution might need guns, and I'm just left thinking this is totally half-assed and trying to say anything that might disrupt the system, if at all. Hell, on Orphans, Chris Martin's trying to speak from the perspective of a Syrian refugee, and yet between the weirdly upbeat tone, the increasingly childlike language, and a hook emphasizing going drinking with friends, later mirrored on the title track, there's no sense of understanding any sense of gravitas or urgency that's going on in that region. And sure, Coldplay's not trying to untangle geopolitics, woe betide them if they tried, but if you travel around the world, and the most you pull in is this shallow and terrified of stirring up any sort of real controversy, your political convictions are not that convincing or interesting. But most galling is Champion of the World, a song dedicated to Scott Hutchinson, the late singer of Frightened Rabbit. And while this track interpolates one of his songs, I don't think it could have missed the point harder, trying for these broadly sketched triumphalism that primarily uses personal pronouns. It doesn't feel like a tribute at all, it just feels self-serving for Chris Martin. But what it also feels is utterly disconnected from emotional reality, both that situation and really the times at large. And thus, the more listens I gave to everyday life, the more I wondered what purpose a project like this even serves beyond cheap, feel-good pablum. And not even well-constructed feel-good pablum at that. Look, I'm not against sentimentality, and let's be blunt, any power this album might have in its message comes entirely from that. And to their credit, Coldplay is great at triggering those feels, but there needs to be some sort of heavier payoff in the sound, or a grounding force that's aware that systemic change will likely be necessary to achieve some of those utopian dreams. And Coldplay, they're never gonna go there, which makes their fleeting attempts at revolution or experimentation utterly toothless for me. Or to put another way, thoughts and prayers. So yeah, 4 out of 10, no recommendation. I don't even know what I can say to Coldplay anymore, because I expect to be in the minority with this opinion, and I don't expect them to change. In fact, I expect this album to do probably really well for them. I'd be shocked if it didn't, and that kind of makes me even sadder. But in reality, they remain the quintessential silent majority act, with this album cementing it. And yeah, while I may be disappointed, take that as you will. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Apologize for most of the review, but it's stuffed up. Got a bit of a cold here that's come out of nowhere. Not pleased with that. Beyond that, if you want to buy or stream the album, again, it's got an audience. Links down there below. And I got the poll up there. I am curious where you guys will fall on this. Hope you guys see the review before Warner Music Group copyright strikes it again. You never know. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys looking for any other reviews or the newest episodes of Billboard Breakdown, or even some retro episodes, links in the card right over there. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.